Leaving an unhealthy relationship is a very complicated situation, far more than the average person would imagine. Hi, my name is Diane Nichols. I am the founder and executive director of Living Waters of Hope. And we're going to be talking about that issue today, obstacles in leaving an unhealthy relationship. So whether you're joining me as a woman who is seeking to be more confident and come alongside of a sister who is struggling in an unhealthy relationship, or perhaps you yourself are wondering, am I in an unhealthy relationship, and why is it so hard for me to leave? What is keeping me bound to a man who's so harmful to me? I love the verse in Psalms where it says that Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted and bind up their wounds. And aren't we all called to do that if we're to be like Jesus? So as we go through this, our time together, just think through how God might want to use you in the life of someone else. Our goal today is to recognize and acknowledge why it is hard for a woman to leave an unhealthy relationship. And why is this important? For you to be better equipped to be a knowledgeable and understanding support person who gives helpful advice. Because so often when our women come forward in our faith communities, um, because domestic abuse is not understood well, there's an assumption that it's just normal marriage conflict, and the advice that they're given, which is typically stay, pray, and submit, is very harmful for a woman who is in a marriage or relationship where they are being harmed by someone else. Our key topics today are understanding enmeshment, which is this kind of bonding together in an unhealthy way. The obstacles in leaving, relational, internal, and external reasons. Trauma bonding and codependency, which is really within this list of reasons. And staying or leaving, what do you do? What do you do? There are two common questions that are often asked when people hear about domestic abuse and the shocking statistics and stories. And they say, well, why does she stay? Or asked another way, why doesn't she just leave? Have you ever thought that when you heard of someone in that situation? These simple questions, often asked from a lack of understanding, have extremely complicated answers. In a poem called Why Does She Stay?, the very final line is, she stays because she is supposed to make it work. And this is how a lot of Christian women feel. I'm supposed to make my marriage work. And their husband is very good at putting a lot of responsibility on her because he's blaming her for all the problems. So she feels she truly is the one that has to make things work. If I could do this better, if I could do that better, if I just did this or didn't do that, he'd be happier and life would be normal. But what they don't realize is with the controlling man who has narcissistic tendencies, typically, they're in a lose-lose situation. No matter what she does, he will always find something to criticize her for because that is how he stays in a position of power and control over her. But because it happens often so subtly within a relationship, it's really hard to realize what's really happening. So the question is, if you're with a group or sharing this video with others in a discussion format, what are some reasons you have heard about why women stay? So if you're with a group, when we do questions, you can just pause the video, but I'm going to keep on going just for the sake of everyone else. Okay, understanding enmeshment. Now this term enmeshment is not one we use very often, but it was used in one of our Oasis classes as I was teaching on this topic, and one of the gals who was attending said, Diane, I was so enmeshed to my husband. And I thought that was just a great word that really kind of paints a good picture. Enmeshment, defined, is to become entangled in something like a net. The synonyms are to entangle, trap, and entrap. It is easy to get caught in the net of abuse, but increasingly, incredibly challenging to become free. And it is so true, so true. I love another verse out of Psalm, my eyes are continually toward the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. If she's in an unhealthy relationship that is unsafe, God will provide a way, and he wants to use you to help her to do that. So please know that these women need a great deal of support. And if you are a gal who is in that situation, know that God is there for you and he wants to help you get to a better place. Understanding enmeshment, a little bit more. Unhealthy enmeshment can compromise safety, values, betray love, and negatively affect many areas of life. It affects every area of a woman's life. She gets into a survival mode, just trying to get through each day, not realizing sometimes that she is in an unhealthy and abusive relationship. It is hard to have a healthy relationship with an unhealthy person who does not have your best interest in mind. I mean, for any of us, it is hard to have a healthy relationship with an unhealthy person who does not have your best interest in mind. Would you choose a friend who exhibits characteristics and behavior and words that reflect more of a self-focus and doesn't really have your best interest in mind? We would not tend to be friends with those kinds of people. But here are women who are married to these men. They often did not know that before marriage, but as the marriage season began and progressed, it was becoming more and more evident. Although again, not all of them quite see it that way because the men are so manipulative, and it makes a woman question herself. Enmeshment is not to be confused with biblical oneness, even though many women may have feelings of love for her husband. How many women say, oh, I can't leave love my husband? But biblical oneness reflects mutual love, mutual respect, mutually beneficial decision making. In biblical oneness, you are able to resolve conflict because you're both willing to take responsibility for your own actions and then work towards a healthy relationship. This is not the working model in an abusive marriage. It's all about him, and that doesn't leave the wife with a lot of options to really do much different than what he wants her to do. So what does it look like from a woman's perspective who is in this type of situation? We call this our sister quote. This is from Patty. When I would begin to describe the insanity of my home life, well-intentioned people responded with incredulity that I could possibly experience such unprovoked attacks. Like, surely you are doing something to instigate this response. I felt totally alone because no one had ever seen what I experienced. It did not seem enough that in my heart, the Holy Spirit was convicting me that what I was experiencing was wrong. I was afraid. What would my pastor, my elders, and my church think? The trick for a woman coming forward for help is that these men have a dual personality. And so in their workplace, in their community, in their church, they present themselves very well. And they are very liked. They're very charming people, which is who they present themselves to often during a dating relationship. But there's another side of these men that they show often after they get married. And that's what the woman is living with. That's very different than what anyone is seeing. So that's why it's so hard for people to understand when a woman comes forward or your friend comes to you and you're thinking to yourself, well, Charlie is such a great guy. I can't imagine him doing these things. And unfortunately, often the man is believed because he is sharing a very twisted story. It's not real at all. It's full of misconceptions and disparaging comments about his wife. And she is not believed. So it's this whole upside down thing only because people don't understand the dynamics of this personality of these men. I just want to stop and say that on our website, there is a 4-part series, just free for anyone. Each part is a half an hour. And I'm discussing how to walk with a woman in crisis. And in that series, I discuss these types of dynamics. So if you really would like more information, which actually would be a great precursor to this video, certainly the dessert at the other end, it would really behoove you to watch that so you are just more equipped and understand better the dynamics of domestic abuse. So again, you can be that helpful person, and you would know who to believe because you would be hearing two different stories if you talk to each of the spouses. All right, so we're going to start into our obstacles. Relational, these are things that a woman is feeling towards her husband in her marriage. She loves him as her husband. Well, of course. She's married to him. She wants to honor her marriage vow. She wants to be that godly wife. She wants to please the Lord. This keeps a Christian woman in a relationship for a long time. And there are men who specifically seek Christian women to marry because they know this. She wants to help them. We women are very empathetic, aren't we? And often the men are not empathetic, but they tend to marry women who are very empathetic. So there's a real shift in who is doing the work in the relationship. She wants her marriage to work. No woman gets married and thinks, okay, I want a divorce. They've worked so hard already in their marriage just to, they've invested a lot of time. They want it to work. They want to be married. He promises to change, and this is part of the cycle of abuse. We'll talk about that in a later slide. It's causing her to think he is changing, and some men are. I don't want to say that no man is going to change. Some men do, but you need to know it's single-digit percents of men who actually do the hard work to change their belief system to become a healthy partner. She desires to protect his reputation. I work with women who have husbands who are elders, they're deacons, they're on the prayer team, they're up on the worship team, they're teaching Sunday school, they're leading a small group, maybe they're the pastor, maybe they're part of a prominent family in church, they've been on the mission field, they are prominent businessmen in the community, maybe they're in law enforcement in the community, maybe they're heading up a big nonprofit organization in the area. There's a lot, maybe they're the local doctor. I mean, it's really hard. Women do take this into consideration because they're empathetic. There have been some good times, absolutely. There have been some great times and good memories that they have built, which is part of the cyclical nature of abusive behavior. She doesn't want to be alone. She doesn't want to be that single woman. She doesn't want that divorce label on her. She wants her marriage to work. He supports and provides for her. Some women are afraid to venture out on their own, and maybe, she is enjoying a lifestyle that she knows that she won't have otherwise. He has health issues. Very hard to leave a man who's ill. What are people going to think? Well, I think to really categorize all these, we need to look at what God's word says about marriage. In Ephesians 5:25, God's command to a husband is, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her. We just don't hear that last phrase enough in our churches. This is a servant leader model. And instead of a man giving himself up for his wife, in a domestically abusive relationship, he demands essentially that his wife give herself up for him, which is what happens. She begins to lose herself more and more as the years go by, as she gives and tries to become who he wants her to be, because he doesn't want her to remain who she is. He doesn't want her to be strong and independent. He wants her to be controllable. Again, if you're in a group, what stands out to you on this list, and have you heard or experienced any of these reasons? We have 2 slides on internal reasons and obstacles. These are things that are going on inside of a woman. The cycle of abuse causing confusion and false hope. If you're not familiar with the cycle of abuse, it is described in that 4-part series I mentioned a few minutes ago. But there are 3 phases. If you go online and look it up, there's also a 4-phase model. I try to keep things simple. There's a calm phase where it is calm. He's loving, he's kind, life feels normal. It's a wonderful, calm time in a home and in a relationship. The next phase is tension building, where he's becoming more irritable, he's becoming more critical, he's easily angered, and she is just waiting for the shoe to drop. She is walking on eggshells. Well, then it happens. There's this explosive event with his anger. Or some men don't use anger to control. They use a silent treatment where they might be silent for like 3 days, but the intent is the same. The message is you better do what I tell you to do or else. And then the cycle repeats itself. The very next morning, he can act like nothing has ever happened. Or he might even have apologies and take the responsibility, even have something he purchased for a woman, flowers or whatever. I mean, I've heard of all these things. But it doesn't take long before he says, and maybe like a day or two, where he says to her, well, if you didn't do X, Y, and Z, I wouldn't have had to get angry. So if he does take responsibility, it's really pretty short-lived. He doesn't take it fully, and it's not sustainable because he's always wanting her to know everything's her fault. Well, then the tension builds up again. Again, she's feeling like she's walking on eggshells, and you get that explosive, or for some men, silent treatment. The danger is in the cyclical pattern of abusive behavior, the cycle repeats itself more frequently and more intensely. All to say, abuse only increases in time unless he is seriously seeking help. A woman can draw some boundaries that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it kind of helps to minimize some of that abuse. But without any checks and balances, abuse just will get worse in time. Statistically, that has been proven. So a cycle of abuse is confusing. He loves me, but he treats me this way. And, and because there was a good, moment or a week or a couple of days or a couple of weeks or even a month, she's thinking, oh, he is changing. Oh, he just had a rough day at work, or things have been so stressful at work, or, maybe I did do something. There's just a lot of confusion caused by this cycle of behavior. There's a lack of domestic abuse knowledge. Where do we learn it? I didn't learn it growing up. In my home, in my school, in my church, I didn't know anything about that. And because it happens so subtly in a relationship, it's really hard to think that you are really in an abusive situation. It kind of becomes this normal. Your normal looks very different, but you're used to it and you just kind of go with the flow. You've learned some coping mechanisms and you make it through. I've had women who've been married for 40 years and say, oh my gosh, Diane, I didn't even know I was in an abusive relationship or an abusive marriage. It happens. That's why we at Living Waters of Hope are so dedicated to education for our women coming through our support classes, for those of you in the faith community. That is just so key to understand these dynamics and to avoid these kinds of relationships. Denial and minimization for herself as an abuse victim. There's an inability to make decisions because often, no matter what she decides, he is criticizing her for it. So she feels that she just can't do anything right. Certainly leaving, that's really a monumental decision after being demeaned for so many years. Tolerance of abuse, it's that, again, that normal, like they just learn to tolerate it. And some women just say, I'll put up with this because for a lot of other reasons. And to a certain degree you can, but you just want to say to yourself, how much am I losing? What's the trade-off? Learned helplessness, where there's kind of a dependency on someone to take care of them. So that causes them to stay instead of leave, even if it's really a terribly harmful situation. And powerlessness, they feel like they have no voice, they can't share an opinion, and they just feel powerlessness, especially if they go to their faith community and they're told, stay, pray, and submit. They just feel like I'm hopeless. It's important to remember through the confusion that the cycle represents in the many ways a woman is confused in these types of relationships. God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. So that confusion is not coming from God. He wants to give her clarity, and his truth will do just that, which is what our Oasis Bible study is all about. So again, what stands out to you on this list, and have you heard or experienced any of these reasons? Our second list of internal obstacles, spiritual reasons. He tells me I'm supposed to submit, or he tells me God hates divorce, so I guess I'm stuck in this marriage, or those kinds of things that he will tell her, or she's telling herself, because our churches don't fully teach as broad as they need to on these topics. In book 2, we have several lessons that really hit hard what God is saying about submission, what God is saying about sexual intimacy, a very, very painful part of a woman's journey in an abusive relationship. We talk about what God's saying about divorce, and we're talking about what forgiveness really looks like and what it is and isn't. All these things, if they're not understood well, can really keep a woman in a relationship far longer than God would ever have intended her to be in it. They're afraid to ask for help. Like you remember from Patty's sister quote, she was afraid. What would people think? What would people think? Would they reject me? Would they help me? Do they understand domestic abuse enough to understand how hard this is? Embarrassment. I have had so many women say, Diane, I'm so embarrassed and humiliated. How could I have gotten into this kind of relationship? Well, there is a reason. And it goes back to that dual personality where these men can be very charming before getting married. And then they do a switch. Or there maybe were some warning signs, but women didn't recognize them. Or maybe they recognized them and I thought, oh, it'll work out after they get married. There's a huge sense of shame, guilt, and a sense of failure. Again, really put on them by their husbands, who should be wearing these himself. But he's very good in making her feel that everything that's wrong is her fault. That's really hard to get over even after leaving a relationship. We work really hard on that through our Oasis Bible study. But that leads to low self-esteem. And that leads to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress syndrome. These are very traumatic situations where you're with a man who's unpredictable in his anger level. That's very traumatizing. If he's backing you into a corner or blocking a doorway where a woman can't get out, or she's trying to call for help and he takes your phone and throws it across, it can be very scary. There's a sense of hopelessness. Again, you can understand that she just doesn't feel like she has any option but to stay. There's a lot of reasons to fear. Fear of getting help, fear of if she leaves, what that's going to look like. Can I support myself? Can I find a job that's going to give me enough income? What is he going to do? How are my kids going to respond? There's just so many things. And trauma bond and codependence are two issues. We're going to talk about that more in just a few more minutes. These are really more on the psychological side of things, and most people don't understand them fully. And I've heard gals say, I'm just going to go back. I don't know why I keep going back. These are not girls in my Oasis study because they learn what the new tactics are when they leave to not go back. But if someone doesn't have the knowledge, I've heard women say, I don't know why I keep going back. Why do I keep going back? But they do. And often there is this irrational bond, this trauma bond. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So trauma bond and codependence, it would be really good for you to understand those two terms. Lots of information online for those. Coercion through threats. He's threatening her. If she leaves, he's threatening to harm himself if she leaves. She doesn't believe she deserves better. And you can see when a woman is so verbally and emotionally and psychologically, spiritually pushed down, and sometimes physically, yes, even in our Christian communities, it does happen more than you'd imagine. You can see where she just doesn't think very much of herself and doesn't really think she deserves any better than what she has. So again, if you were the group, what stands out to you on this list? Have you heard or experienced any of these reasons? It's just a great discussion. If you have other gals you can do this video series with. Our final list of obstacles are things happening outside of a woman that affect her. Children, oh, that's a big reason why women stay. They really are afraid to pull apart the family unit, yet other women are leaving to protect their children. So, there's both sides of that. Very, very hard. Pets, and this is not a small issue. Pets can, especially if they're larger pets, or a woman wants to leave, but she can't take her pets with her, and he might be threatening to harm them. So it might sound trite to you, but it is really a significant issue for some women. A pastor or church leader said to stay. A friend or family member said to stay. And what I want you to do is ask enough questions to assess what is going on in her life so you know how to give her helpful advice. Because these two things, if she's truly in a very harmful relationship, and her even to the point where her life might be threatened, or just her own self-worth and just how she is perceiving reality and who God says she is, if that's all getting damaged, something needs to be done. Otherwise, she will lose herself totally, and that's just not the kind of marriage model God has shared with us to live by. A lack of finances, another huge reason. Not all women have jobs. They've got to find a job. They've got to save up some money. If they don't have a place to go, they've got to figure out how they're going to support themselves. That's a big obstacle. Lack of transportation. Maybe they only had one car in the family, and some men do that very intentionally so that their wife can't go anywhere. Health issues. Maybe she has health issues and she can't work, or it just is causing her to kind of depend on him. Or again, perhaps he has health issues. Maybe there are drug, alcohol, and pill issues on her side, which some gals, it's a coping mechanism. Now, I don't run into that hardly ever with the women I work with, but it is not that uncommon that some of the husbands have these issues. A percent, not all of them across the board, but some do. But anyway, if she has some addictive issues, it's hard to kind of put yourself together and live independently. Her family likes him, or maybe she likes his. He has told her that no one else will want her, and this is absolutely what happens for some women. He has told her that she cannot make it on her own. Again, words to try to break down her resolve, to make her stay. And it just feeds into her own self-doubt. He has said he would kill himself if she leaves. I knew a young lady that she wanted to get out of this relationship, but she feared him, that he would kill her, or that he would kill himself. He would go outside of their apartment building, get a rope, and tie it onto a tree with a noose. And he'd say, if you leave, I'm going to kill myself. Sometimes they threaten to kill the pets. They'll say, or they say, well, I'll find you wherever you go. I mean, some men are very unhealthy and not mentally stable. There's no support system. Ladies, oh my gosh, this is huge. And this is why I love that you're watching this today. Your support for a woman, even if it's one person to walk with her that understands some of these things, will help her find the strength, will help her find the confidence, will help her find herself again, and will enable her to listen to the Lord to help make the hard decisions that she needs to make. Whether she chooses to stay or leave, she still needs you to support her. So again, our same question, what stands out to you on this list? And have you heard or experienced any of these reasons? We're going to talk about trauma bonding and codependency. So trauma bonding is an unhealthy and irrational attachment to another individual caused by intermittent positive treatment and negative behavior. In other words, this cycle of abuse. Now, doesn't it cause that? This positive behavior and then negative, going back and forth and back and forth. And a woman so yearns to be loved and so yearns for those kind and calmer moments that she kind of puts up with everything else just to have that. And it creates an irrational attachment. The result, though, is a loss of self. It's a distorted view of reality and a false sense of hope, thinking that, well, he's going to get better, he's going to get better. And it just causes these women to keep going back, thinking, well, I know I go back, but I keep going back. It's an irrational bond. Codependency is a dysfunctional helping relationship where one person supports or enables another person's addiction, poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, or underachievement. Some of these terms really describe some of these guys for sure. So it's, and sometimes if you're not a codependent person, you kind of end up being that way because you want to, that empathetic part of us as women, thinking we have to help and fix these guys. But they don't want to get fixed themselves. That's the key. Unless they're willing to get the help they need, there's nothing a woman can do. Because why would he give up his place of power? That's more important to him than getting help. Whatever wound that's feeding inside of him that's unhealthy, that's what's doing. And that's outright sin. We need to call it for what it is. It is just outright sin and rebelliousness against who God calls us to be, especially them as a husband. So among the core characteristics of codependency, the most common theme is an excessive reliance on other people for approval and a sense of identity. So this can be caused by loss of self, even to begin with. If we don't know who we are and we're looking to other people or even jobs or whatever to feel good about who we are, that's a spiritual issue, isn't it? When a woman looks to God to meet her deepest needs instead of her husband, the bond that is keeping her in an unhealthy place will begin to weaken. And she's able to find herself again. And this is what we really work on with our Oasis Bible study classes for our wonderful Oasis gals who join us, just helping them to understand who they are in Christ and how valuable they are to God. That begins to kind of give them strength and self-confidence and helps them to be less dependent on getting that approval from their husband. So why did she stay? Here's a story. Why did I stay? The answer is easy. I didn't know he was abusing me. Even though he held those loaded guns to my head, pushed me downstairs, threatened to kill our dog, pulled the key out of the car ignition as I drove down the highway, poured coffee grinds on my head as I dressed for a job interview, I never once thought of myself as a battered wife. There's a little picture of coffee ground, wet, grimy coffee grinds. Instead, I was a very strong woman in love with a deeply troubled man, and I was the only person on earth who could help him face his demons. This is a TED Talk. If you know what TED Talks are, they are 20-minute talks. You can find them online. Google Leslie Steiner, Google Leslie Morgan Steiner, or just Google domestic abuse. She'll come up with the options. She talks for 20 minutes about this story, and she was a professional, he was a professional, but she talks through the dynamics of what happens after marriage where a man begins to get himself in a place of power. And then look where she ends up. She's thinking all upside down, isn't she? That's what happens. That's why it's so hard for women to leave. And that's why women need women to walk with them in an understanding way. So important. So staying or leaving, big decisions. I'm just going to give you 2 slides of just a couple of points to keep in mind. We'll talk about this probably in another training video because there's a lot to be said on how to help a woman either leave safely or to stay as best she can. Knowing if or when to leave is a personal decision, one that needs God's guidance. No one can or should make that decision for her. She's got to make it, gals. She has to own that. And I always say to the gals, what is God telling you? What is God telling you to do? Statistic, a woman will leave 7 times before a final departure. And this, I see this played out when I tell my gals in the Oasis Bible study, when we get to lessons on separation, we talk about this, I said, that's not going to be you, because you're going to learn how these men change their games to re-hook you and try to get you back into a relationship with him. So, but if you don't understand how these men will then behave differently to woo a woman back, before he, instead of getting the help he needs to be healthy, his game plan is to get her back. And he wants to get back in her head. There's a lot of ways they do that. And if a woman doesn't understand this, she will think, oh, he's really changed. Oh, he really does love me. But that is not the case more times than not. Another quote from another survivor. It is not easy to leave when someone you love. Oh, it's not easy to leave someone you love. It's not easy to leave when you have nowhere to go. It's not easy to leave when you are threatened. It's not easy to leave when you remember how it used to be, those good times, or when they can romance you during the good times, or when they promise it is the last time. That cycle of violence, that calm part, that again, all these, how many of these things is she saying that comes out of that cyclical nature where he woos her back in by nice behavior? Because you believe in love and you believe in them. And gals, boy, as Christian women, I mean, we so are there, aren't we? We want what's best for our men. We want to help them be all that they can be. We know they have problems. What can we do to help them? But that's where women become very vulnerable and lose sight of who God wants them to be, and lose sight of what a marriage should look like, and lose sight of where to draw that line of like, where's that line you draw between how long can I live with this and when do I just need to get to a healthier place because this is not healthy for me or my children. A few more points. If God is leading her in the direction of the separation, it could be the most loving thing to do for her and her husband. If God calls us to be a helpmate to our husbands, aren't we to help them try to be all they can be for God? When a woman stays, she is essentially enabling abuse. Abuse has been enabled for quite some time. It isn't a loving decision to say, hey, there are consequences to your decision. If you're not willing to get the help I keep asking you to get, I'm going to have to separate myself because it's not healthy for me, and I need to get the help I need after all of this harm that's been done for me. And some men, I remember meeting a guy. It was in a counseling class, and he was in his own recovery, and he had said, well, my wife had to hit me over the head with a 2x4, and I said to him, well, what was that? And he said, well, she left me. And that's what caused him to get the help he needed. Sometimes in our churches, we want to keep our marriages together at all costs, but ladies, that is not wise. When you learn, the more you learn about domestic abuse, you realize that you could really be putting her in harm's way, and you could even be putting her life in danger. Remind her that she is not alone in this decision, that God is there for her. I love this Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. So whether that is for a woman you're working with, that she can lean on that verse, maybe it's for you trying to seek wisdom to know how to help her. Maybe you're watching this video today and you're saying, I don't know what to do. He's so harmful. I'm so afraid to leave. I don't know what to do. Just keep trusting the Lord and he will show you the way. He will show you the way. And he does make a way when there feels like there is no way. I've seen it many times, gals. God is a God that works miracles, but you just have to be listening to him and staying as closely plugged into him as you can. Okay, next steps. If you want to just think about what you've learned today, again, whether you're with a group or just on your own, and you want to really apply what you've learned, here are some questions for you. What is one truth from today's training video that can help you be more effective in supporting a wounded sister? What are your next steps in implementing that truth? What thoughts or beliefs have been confirmed, challenged, or changed in the area of domestic abuse, in the area of why a woman stays or why she leaves? Who else in your church or organization needs to know this information? Who can you share this video with? Who can you share that 4-part video with? We need to really educate our brothers and sisters so that we can have a broader support team within our faith communities for these women. And do you know anyone who would benefit from the Oasis Bible study? There's someone in your circle of friends, people that you know, family, that is looking for a faith-based support system. We are here to provide that. Just have the gals come online, livingwatersofhope.org, and there's all kinds of information there. Okay, our goal, again, just to recap, our goal was to recognize and acknowledge why it is hard for a woman to leave an unhealthy relationship. Our topics covered were understanding enmeshment, obstacles, relational, internal, and external, trauma bonding, codependency, a little bit more information on those kind of less understood issues, and staying or leaving. Yes, we have so many resources on our website for you. We have the Oasis Bible study for women who are needing some faith-based support. We're confidential or safe. We are online currently. We have a book. This is our book that we go through, book 1. This is a women's journey, healing from domestic abuse. This is restoring hope and dignity. Book 2 is the same study, just continued, and we'll be restoring truth and strength, as we'll be hitting scripture in an even deeper way, and some other areas. So anyway, we'd love to have you part of our group or have you pass on information. We have Oasis Bible Study flyers you can put up in your churches or organizations. They will tear off tablets. They're very professional looking. They're professionally printed. We have posters about domestic abuse if you just want to help raise awareness in your faith community or organization. Again, very professionally put together. Our website, we just have a lot of resources in our list of resources. Again, our 4-part training series. We have educational Facebook posts. Follow us on Facebook. We're always putting up some informational pieces, the events that we do off and on throughout the year. And our educational newsletters, if you're watching this and you are not on our email list, I would just urge you and encourage you to sign up. We send out, we're so educationally oriented. We send out 1 to 2 emails a month, a little bit more in the fall because we have so many activities going on, because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. October is when we kick off our Bible studies. So it's a really busy time for us, and we just like to let people know what opportunities they have to learn or to be a part of what we do. So the question is God leading you to perhaps become a facilitator for one of our Oasis Bible study groups? You know, if you find your heart burning within you and you just, you ache for these gals, and you feel that God is leading you to do something like that, contact us for more information. Again, Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted and bind up their wounds, and he wants to do that through you. It's not by mistake that you chose to watch this video. Thank you for joining me today. If you're so led, we provide our classes and our trainings at this time at no cost, and we are hoping to continue to do that, but we need financial help to do that. We really do depend on our donations. So please prayerfully consider that. You can donate again online at livingwatersofhope.org. There's an address there too if you're a check writer. If you have any questions from today or just at any time, please know that you can contact me. I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. We at Living Waters of Hope are here to serve you. We're here to serve our faith community and our churches and our sisters who are wounded by domestic abuse. So we are available. And again, I thank you for watching our video today and being with me. May God bless you and equip you for all that He calls you to do.